Hello, and thank you for joining us for another Zoo to You. My name is Nora, and today we're here with our saddle-billed storks, one of our taller birds here in the tropical forest. So these guys live right next to our giant anteater, and we have our male moving around up front, and in the back is our female, Lady Anne. So it looks like he's coming over to see what we're up to. These are a really cool stork. They're found in Central and Southern Africa, so definitely not a local bird, but they are one of the many shore birds that are out there. They're kind of related to herons and cranes, so you may see some of those birds around here in Massachusetts. You can see that our male's kind of poking around at some of those sticks down there. And around this time of year, that's a pretty common behavior for a lot of birds because they might be building up their nests. So saddle-billed storks are really special because they do tend to pair bond. So these two have been together for quite a while, and every year they'll build a really big nest. So their nest will be about 6 feet wide, which is pretty impressive. It's like a nice king-size bed. And they will lay around 2 to 3 eggs each year, so not too many. So you can see he's kind of moving around trying to find which sticks might work best for him. So they're also kind of showing off the way that they use their beaks. So he's kind of using it to pick up these sticks, but the way that he would use it for hunting is kind of similar. So he would strike his prey under the water. He might use his feet to grab them, but mostly he'll use that beak. So he'll be eating mostly fish and maybe frogs or snails, any small animals that he could fit in that beak, because unlike us humans, they do not chew their food. They will swallow it whole, so it has to be small enough that they can do that, but big enough to have, enough nutrients, enough calories in it. So these two have been with us for quite a while. He came to us from the San Diego Zoo, and they are a breeding pair. So they are part of a species survival plan, which basically means that they've been matched up, and we're hoping that they will have chicks at some point. And so hopefully they'll build a nest and lay their eggs, and they will take turns sitting on those eggs for about a month to incubate them. And then they'll take care of that chick once it hatches, or if there's a couple chicks, they'll take care of them for a couple of months after that before they can become independent and take care of themselves. So these are a really cool species because they are a very, very large type of bird. So we have some other big birds here at the zoo. We have our Andean condors with their 10 to 12 foot wingspan. We have our ostriches and our emus, which are very tall but flightless birds. And then we also have our saddle-billed storks here who can fly, although these guys don't fly around their exhibit. And that wingspan is going to be between 8 and 9 feet, so almost as big as those Andean condors. And when they're just standing around, they can be up to 6 feet tall. These guys are probably a little over 5 feet tall. So you can notice the way that their legs move is pretty different from the way our legs move. So it looks like their knees are kind of bending backwards, whereas ours bend forwards. But those are actually their ankles if we're comparing it to our legs. So their knee joint is going to be much higher up, kind of in their body. And their ankle is those little pink joints that you're seeing. So what looks like their shin is actually those foot bones. And then it's like they're standing on their tippy toes. So they move pretty differently from us, but in general they have that same, those same bones, kind of the same overall structure. It just looks a little different. So there he's showing off with some of his agility. You can see that really big wingspan, and he found a really nice stick that I think he wants to put in their little nest area. So you can see there's a bit of a pile of sticks growing, so it does seem that they are working on their nest.
Do we know how much they weigh? There was a question in the chat.
Ooh, that is a great question. So they only weigh up to about 15 pounds, and that's for the males. The females tend to weigh slightly less. So anywhere from 10 to 15 is kind of in their normal range, which is very light for a creature that is about 6 feet tall. So it seems like our female is not really doing too much of anything today. But sometimes you might notice some other birds in this exhibit with them. Typically it's our scarlet ibis, those kind of pinkish reddish colored birds that are a little bit smaller, and they'll kind of fly around. They're one of our many free flight birds here in the tropical forest. So you'll see them, you'll see some other ibis. You might be able to hear some other birds in the background right now. So if you do see some birds flying around, we do have free flight birds. They have not escaped. So typically their lifespan is about 12 years out in the wild, and our male, he is 12 years old. But our female, she is 32 years old. So that is much, much older than their typical lifespan, which just goes to show how successful they can be when they are in human care. So if we take very good care of them, like we do here at the zoo, they can live for quite a long time.
Another question about whether these guys make noise.
Ooh, whether they make noise. So that's something that makes them pretty easy to distinguish from cranes or herons, which kind of look pretty similar to them. Those other birds, especially cranes, will make a lot of noise, but these guys, they don't really make much noise at all. And scientists used to think that it's because they didn't have like the vocal cords, they didn't have the capabilities for it, but turns out they do. They just don't really use it. They just don't tend to make a lot of noise. And if you've ever been in our Andean condor exhibit, they don't make a lot of noise either. So if you're ever walking around the zoo and you hear some birds making some sounds, it's probably not either of these two. So the birds that you might hear in the background right now are some of our free flight birds and not our saddle-billed storks.
And would both the male and female watch over an egg when they have it?
They do. So they both incubate the egg. They'll take turns sitting on the nest, which for some birds is pretty common. For others, it's just the female that does it. But these guys, both of them will. And that's kind of where that myth of the stork bringing babies comes from, because they both take care of the babies, and I guess people saw that as being a good role model for parents, and that's how that myth kind of got going.
There's another question about, do they eat a lot?
Ooh,
or what kind of foods do they eat?
So they eat meat, so they'll eat fish or frogs, or maybe small mammals that they might find, or crustaceans is another popular one if they can find them. And because they don't really weigh a lot, they're pretty small in terms of their weight, they don't really eat a ton of food, or as much food as you might expect a 6-foot bird to eat. And they do eat, several times a day. They spend most of their time hunting, so they'll be wading through the water looking for food, and that's how they'll spend most of their time if they are not building a nest like you see them doing today.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more, and I'll double these ones up. Could you just remind us what species this is, and also, is this an indoor exhibit?
So this is our Saddlebilled Stork exhibit, and it is indoors. It's in our tropical forest building right next door to our anteater exhibit. So our tropical forest is a great place to be on a rainy day like today. But as the weather warms up, we do have some other outdoor exhibits that'll start opening up, like our Aussie aviary, if you want to see some much smaller birds that make a lot more sound than these guys. And that's currently open on the weekends. And then starting May 16th, it'll be open every day until Labor Day. But here in the tropical forest, you can see these guys all year round.
Okay, is there anything else you want to say as we wrap up?
Well, I would say that these guys are pretty overlooked here at the zoo. Sometimes you go straight to the giant anteater, but I would definitely recommend stopping by and taking a look at them. They seem to always be doing something interesting, like nest building or looking around their exhibit like they're doing now. So definitely stop by and say hello to them when you come visit the zoo. So thank you to all of you who have been visiting us at the zoo and wearing your masks and social distancing. We're very excited that everyone is joining us, and thank you for joining us virtually today and for meeting some of our taller birds here at the zoo.